In this video, I just want to talk briefly about functions. A function is a rule that's going to assign to each element x in a particular set exactly one element inside of a different set. One way you may have been told to recognize functions is to apply the vertical line test. So I have two rules here. One is y equals x squared, and the other is x squared plus y squared is equal to 1. If I were to draw vertical lines through the graphs of these two rules, I can determine whether or not these rules represent a function in the xy plane. Notice that for the rule y is equal to x squared, it doesn't matter where I place my vertical line, every vertical line is going to intersect this parabola at only one spot. However, if I come over to the circle, x squared plus y squared is equal to 1, I can draw some vertical lines that intersect the graph of this rule only once. However, there is going to be at least one vertical line that intersects at two different spots. Because it intersects at more than one spot, this rule is not going to be a function. Because our rule y is equal to x squared is a function, we can write f of x is equal to x squared. We can't do this for the circle because it's not a function. A common question to ask regarding functions is what is the domain and what is the range of our given function? In this video, I'm just going to figure out what the domain and the range are using a picture of our function. And in future videos, you're going to take a look at different methods to use when dealing with special types of functions, like rational functions or radical functions. Let's say we know what the graph of our function x squared looks like. The domain of x squared are all of the possible values of x that give us an output of y. So notice here that if I started out with an x on the x-axis here, I could scroll upwards and I could find a y value that matches up with my starting x value. And theoretically, I could do this for any x value on the x-axis for our parabola. Now this is true for most of the x values over here on the function 1 over x. I could start with an x value and I could go up or down and find a corresponding y value. However, there's one x value where that's not going to work, and that's here at x is equal to 0. Notice that I could scroll up and I never quite find a y value that's going to match up with x is equal to 0. And the same thing happens if I scroll down. I'm never going to find a y value that's going to correspond with x is equal to 0. So in the case of this function, we might say that the domain is everything except for 0. Whereas over here with our parabola, we didn't run into any of those issues. So the domain is all possible x values. We could do something similar with the range. That is, we could scroll along our y-axis and we could ask ourselves what y's get matched up with a particular x value. So you can see over here on my parabola, if I pick a y that's above the x-axis, I can find a corresponding x that will match up with it. However, if I come down here and I scroll out to try to find a particular x value, I can't find one. So the smallest y value we can choose is right here at 0, and that gives us a range of 0 to positive infinity. If we do something similar here on our function 1 over x, that is, we start with a particular y, we can usually scroll outwards and find the corresponding x value that matches up with that y, except in one case. If I start at y is equal to 0 and I scroll outwards to try to find my function, I can't find it in either direction, so I can't find a corresponding x value. This means that 0 should not be included as part of the range, and we get this interval, negative infinity to 0, union 0 to positive infinity. So what I've done on this particular page below is I've given you some basic functions that you should know the pictures of, as well as the domain and the range. My recommendation for you is to know these basic functions before you go into your calculus course.